What's up guys, it's Kelly and today I am giving you some Spooktober recommendations. If you find yourself enjoying this video, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps me out, and if you're new here and would like to see more of me, then please subscribe. So some of you will know that I am one of the 13 booktubers co-hosting Spooktober this year. If you aren't aware of Spooktober and what it is, I'll leave a link to my announcement video in the description. You can go check that out and just have like a better understanding of what Spooktober is, what's happening this year, all that jazz. But for those of you who have not yet made your TBRs, never fear, I have a recommendations video for you. So I've gone through and made a recommendation for almost every prompt. There are, I think, 2 that I couldn't give recommendations for, but you'll see why as I go through the list. So around this time last year, I did make a recommendations video of like dark, creepy, spooky books, which I'll leave a link to in the cards and in the description. You guys seem to really enjoy that. It's one of my more popular videos. I loved making it. So definitely head to that for some more like Halloween themed recommendations. I started off with books that kind of had a dark, creepy vibe to them, but without actually being at all scary. And I worked my way up in intensity and ended with like actual traditional horror. So there really is a recommendation for everyone in that video, and I think much the same in this video. I haven't gone with traditionally scary books or traditionally creepy books for every prompt. There are a couple thrown in that are like perfect Halloween books, but there really is a range of books here. So again, I think that there's something for everyone. If you want to participate in Spooktober because you want to participate and you want to be part of something and you want to be in the little community, but you don't really like traditionally creepy books, I think that you'll still find some recommendations in this video that you'll be able to use for Spooktober and just really enjoy the readathon reading a bunch of different books. So if you haven't watched my Spooktober announcement video, basically, Spooktober this year is one big Halloween house party happening over on BookTube, and there are 4 themes for the prompts, and then within each theme there are 5 reading prompts, and it's like the 4 different facets that make up a fun Halloween party. First things first, when you get invited to a Halloween party, you have to decide what to wear. If you want to wear a scary costume, you're gonna have to read a horror. So for this I went with The Shining by Stephen King. This is probably my favourite horror book that I've ever read. This is definitely my favourite Stephen King book that I've ever read. So this follows a recovering alcoholic called Jack Torrance and his family as they go and spend winter at the Overlook Hotel in the Colorado mountains. So the hotel closes over the winter season because it's just too cold, you get snowed in, you're completely deserted from any civilization, and you can't run a business like that, obviously. So they close down for the winter months, and they need someone to stay at the hotel to just make sure that everything kind of stays running as it should, and particularly to make sure that the boiler doesn't like overboil and explode. So that is what Jack goes to do. He takes his family with him, and this is supposed to be the beginning of a fresh start for them, but they're not there long before strange things start happening. The animal-shaped hedges seem to be coming alive and moving. They hear voices, the elevator's riding up and down with no one in it. Could there be something more sinister happening at the Overlook Hotel? But maybe you're not so into horror and you want to wear a silly costume. Read a book that you think will make you laugh. Now, I'm recommending this book because I don't think it's one that people would typically associate with this prompt, but A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I read this earlier this year and I absolutely adored it. So this follows a girl called Pip who I think is busy doing her A-levels, and she has to do this big research project, and she decides to do it on a cold case in her town. So a few years ago, one of the high school girls went missing and is presumed to have been murdered by her boyfriend. He then committed suicide, which pretty much cemented everyone's belief that he'd done it, and the case was closed. They never bothered solving it, they never found her body, they never found any evidence that he'd done it, but everyone was kind of happy that the problem was over now. Except Pip's not sure that that's the case, so she decides to investigate in the hope that she'll be able to clear his name. But investigating a murder can be dangerous, and there are people who will do absolutely anything to shut Pip up. Now, you're probably at this point wondering why I'm recommending this book, but I found it so funny. Like, the mystery element of it was exceptional. I thought it was such a well-written and well-crafted mystery, but it was also so funny and so entertaining, and I genuinely laughed out loud while reading this. So if you're looking for something that still has that like mystery autumnal vibe but will also make you laugh, Good Girl's Guide to Murder. But maybe instead you want to dress up as a beautiful fae queen, an elf, a goblin, a hobbit. You want to wear a fantasy costume? You're gonna have to read a fantasy book. For this you can pretty much watch any of my videos ever and read any book that I've given 4 or 5 stars, but I'm going to recommend in particular Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor because I adore this book and I feel like I don't talk about it often enough. So this follows a librarian called Laszlo Strange, who since he was 5 years old has been obsessed with this lost mythical city of Weep. But he's just like here for his books, you know, he just wants to read, have a nice quiet life. He's not like brave enough or bold enough to go in search of this lost city, but then an opportunity presents itself that is impossible to pass up, and an envoy of people come to his town from the lost city of Weep looking for volunteers to go back to Weep with them and help them solve this immense problem that they have. And Laszlo is finally going to get to explore this mythical city that has enchanted him his whole life and find out what happened that caused it to retreat from the world all those years ago. And while he helps the people of Weep solve this very strange problem that they have, he keeps being visited in his dreams by a blue-skinned goddess. If you're in a relationship, you might want to go the couple's costume route, and for that you're going to have to read romance. So for this I've chosen The Time Traveller's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. This is the love story of Claire and Henry, who meet when Claire is 6 and Henry is 36, and get married when Claire is 22 and Henry is 30. Sounds impossible, but Henry has this rare disorder where he'll just be yanked out of a moment and flung into some point in his past or future. So this follows Claire and Henry as they fall in love despite these almost insurmountable circumstances, and it's told through a series of these moments going back and forward in time where Claire and Henry get to spend time with each other and ultimately fall in love. It is heartbreakingly sad. I have done a full review of this like a couple years ago and I cried for probably about the last 100 pages of this book, but it is a beautiful romance and I absolutely loved it. Maybe you're single but you still don't want to go stag and you're going to do a besties costume. You're going to have to buddy read a book, so obviously I can't really recommend something for this, but find someone to buddy read with. Now we have arrived at the party and I don't know about you, but I've been starving myself the whole day so I can get at that refreshments table and eat a whole lot of food. First up, we're gonna loosen ourselves up a bit with a little bit of punch, head to the punch bowl and read a book with a character who fights a lot. So for this, I'm recommending The Boy Who Steals Houses by C.G. Drews. So this is about 2 brothers called Sam and Avery who've pretty much been like neglected or let down by every adult in their life, and they're now just fending for themselves. So pretty much every night Sam breaks into strangers' houses, and it's not about stealing things from the houses, although he does do that as well. It's about feeling like he has a home for the night. It's just about feeling safe and feeling like he has a home and like he might one day have a family. But one day he breaks into the wrong house and the family comes home earlier than he expects and he gets stuck there and ends up having to figure out a way out of this really difficult situation, which he does by just making friends with everyone, and the story goes on from there. Obviously, Sam and Avery have very difficult lives, made more difficult by the fact that Avery is quite severely autistic, and to be honest, I think that Sam is definitely on the spectrum as well, and their whole life they've had to endure people mocking Avery, people trying to take advantage of him, people just being really cruel to him, and as a result Sam has become very good at fighting and he tends to get into scrapes and punching matches far too often. So this book is heartbreaking and heartwarming. It's wonderfully written, it's just so good. highly, highly recommend it. Next is Eyeball Soup, a cover that you can't stop eyeballing, and for that I've gone with Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. This was also a book that I read last year, I think around the same time that I read The Boy Who Steals Houses, and also thoroughly enjoyed this. I just love the cover. Okay, I think it has a really great cover. I've always been drawn to it. This is about a boy called Michael who's a staunch atheist but gets sent to a Catholic school and is convinced that this is just going to be hell for him, until he finds out that there are other kids there who don't believe everything that they're told to believe, and he ends up joining Heretics Anonymous. This is a secret club that 4 of them have created, and it's a place where they can share ideas, where they can talk, where they can feel free to express themselves exactly the way that they are without having to worry about getting into trouble for not believing everything that the school is shoving down their throats. Next up is Mrs. Lovett's Meat Pies, a book with a character you think will be unlikable, and hey, why not let's just go for Mrs. Lovett? I don't like her. I love Helena Bonham Carter. I love Helena Bonham Carter as Mrs. Lovett, but I do not like Mrs. Lovett. She's a terrible person. I am still of the opinion that Sweeney could have reformed himself if not for her. She was truly the evil one in that relationship, and much the same in the book. So I think a lot of people don't actually realise that Sweeney Todd was based on a book. I read this probably about 10 years ago, and I think I might actually make this a future book club book because I'm desperately due for a reread of it. But yeah, this is the story of Sweeney Todd, a barber who was wrongly imprisoned, and when he gets released from prison, goes to find his wife, and when he finds out that she has died, goes on a murderous rampage with his neighbour and kills people who she bakes into pies. It's a good time. There's a Stephen Sondheim musical based on it. Even better time. All in all, good time. Next up, we spy The Devil's Food Cake, and for that we have to read a book with a black cover. So I've gone with We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. So this follows a woman called Eva who never really wanted to be a mother, but became one, and her son then grew up to go on a murderous rampage and kill a bunch of people. And the book is set 2 years after the school massacre, as she reflects on her life, on the way that she raised him, and wonders if there was anything that she could have done differently, anything that she could have done to prevent what happened. It just follows her trying to come to terms with what happened. And lastly is The Candy Bowl. Take a small piece and read a graphic novel or a novella. I've chosen a novella, which is Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is actually one of my favourite books. I think it's so brilliant, and considering it is only 120 pages, might actually reread this quite soon because it's been a while and I have forgotten the finer points. But basically this is set on a farm, quite literally, and we follow the animals as they start a revolution and take over the farm. They overthrow the human owners and they start living their lives the way they want to live their lives. But as often happens, people can't just be satisfied with what they've got, or in this case, animals can't be satisfied, and before long, power and greed starts corrupting some of the animals. Next up, we're going to head to the dance floor. Now, I'm not much of a dancer, but I do like me some spooky music. First song on the playlist is The Monster Mash, read a book that has a creature in it, and for that I'm going to recommend Generation Dead by Daniel Waters. This is a paranormal romance YA series about zombies. So this is set in a world where when teenagers die, most of them don't seem to be staying dead. They'll die, they'll be buried, and then before long they'll find their way out of their graves and they'll resurrect as zombies. And it's like a very normal thing. There are zombies at their school, there are zombies going to work. It's very normal to have zombies around. It's not like a weird thing at all, but there is still quite a lot of stigma associated with them. So our main character, Phoebe, starts to fall for one of the zombies at her high school, and you know, she just can't stop herself falling in love with that pale skin, that pale, cold, dead skin. I know zombies and vampires are basically the same thing, but like, vampires are glamorous and zombies are gross. Let's just be real. But not everyone is as accepting as Phoebe, and there are many people who would like to see the community rid of zombies forever. They feel like they're a plague, they're a pestilence, they don't want zombies around. So this is a star-crossed lovers zombie romance. Enjoy. Next up is I Put a Spell on You, read a book that features magic. So for this I've gone for Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where our main character has been betrothed to marry the evil ruler of her kingdom because of a bargain that her dad struck with him when just before she was born. And since birth, she's just been training to kill him. Her plan is that she's going to go into the castle, she's going to seduce him, and then she's going to murder him because he's this evil guy that, you know, has been making life miserable for everyone. But then she gets there and she gets to know him and starts to realise that maybe there's a different side to him than everyone thinks. Next up, we're going to do the Time Warp. This is one where you might find me on the dance floor because I don't actually have to figure out how to dance. I can just do the dance. So might do this one. We're going to read a book set in a different time, and for that I'm recommending Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Jane Austen and Seth Grahame-Smith. There's a whole series of these. I've got Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, which I haven't read yet because I haven't read Sense and Sensibility, and there's also Anna Karenina and Robots, I think. But yeah, you'll know I love Pride and Prejudice and I love zombies, so big fan. This is Pride and Prejudice with zombies. There's not much more I can tell you than that. Next up is Superstition, read a book based on folklore or mythology, and for someone who claims to like mythology retellings, I struggled and eventually I just defaulted to Percy Jackson. I'll see myself out. And lastly is Thriller. I know that this is one where there is a dance as well, but I don't actually know the dance, so will not be dancing along to this one, but if you would like to, you're gonna have to read a thriller. For this I'm going with The Memory Wood by Sam Lloyd. This is a book that I read earlier this year that I thought was absolutely fantastic. It's about a 13-year-old girl who gets abducted and wakes up in this stone prison in the woods, and a young boy comes down to talk to her. His name's Elijah, and he is so excited because he's lived in the Memory Wood his whole life and he's never had a friend, he's never had anyone to play with. So Elijah is super happy that Eliza's here and he has a friend that he can play with. He does not want her to leave. By contrast, Eliza realizes that Elijah is her one link to the outside world, and she starts subtly trying to convince him to set her free. So the two of them start playing these psychological mind games with each other where she's trying to convince him to free her without him realizing that she's trying to get him to free her, and he's trying to thwart her plans to get free without her realizing that he's thwarting her plans, so that she will still want to be his friend and still want to talk to him. It is super twisted. The plot twist at the end is just so good, would highly recommend. And then lastly, we're onto those fun activities that just make Halloween parties a good time. First up, we're going to carve some jack-o'-lanterns and read a book with a face on the cover. So this is going to largely depend on your editions of things, but I went with Lord of the Flies by William Golding, which has many faces on it, but you know, you'll just have to find a book that has a face on it. Now, I read this about 6 years ago, so I might be missing some of the finer points, but from what I remember, this is about a group of boys who are on a school trip and they end up stranded on this island and they have to find a way to survive. So they start like building shelters and hunting for food, and they're just like having a grand old time. There's no adults, there's no teachers, there's no parents, they can do whatever they want. It seems like their best life. They start to give into the wilderness and they start to give into this sense of savagery, but it doesn't take long for them to start turning on each other. Next up, we're going to bob for apples, sink your teeth in and read a tome. So for this, I've gone with Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I feel like the generally accepted definition of a tome is over 500 pages, and this is 706 pages, so I think we're doing okay. This is about a little boy who is waiting for his mum after school one day, and he ends up following this voice into the woods and disappears for 7 days. When he comes out, he seems fine. He doesn't seem to have been harmed in any way, but he's definitely changed. Suddenly he is doing really well at school, where before he was struggling. He's reading at like a 7th grade reading level. Oh, did I mention I think he's 7? He's doing super well in maths. So he's unharmed, but definitely not unchanged. And he's come out of the woods with this mission that he and his friends have to build a treehouse in the woods, and it has to be finished by Christmas Day. Otherwise, everyone is going to die. And soon more and more of the town's children start acting strangely, start hearing voices, start doing things that they ordinarily never would have done. And it all seems to be tied to this treehouse in the woods. It's mystical, it's creepy, it's sinister, it's brilliantly written, it's atmospheric. I can't recommend this book enough. It was 700 pages and I was gripped from beginning to end. And then we have what I can normally be found doing at a party, which is hanging out with the pets, and for that you have to read a book with an animal on the cover. So I've gone with The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I talk about how much I love The Secret History a lot, but I don't talk about The Goldfinch as much. This is about a boy called Theo who is in the wrong place at the wrong time and gets caught in the middle of a terrorist attack. The art museum that he's in with his mother is bombed, and in the heat of the moment, he ends up stealing this painting called The Goldfinch, which his mother is just in love with. He just like runs home, runs to safety, and later finds out that his mum died in the bombing. And from then on, he's kind of shunted between homes and between relatives, never really gets to settle, never really gets to feel at home anywhere. The one constant in his life is this painting of the goldfinch that he can look at and that he can think of his mother, and ultimately this painting draws him into the criminal underworld and into the world of shady business dealings, of counterfeit art, counterfeit antiques. It's so fascinating, it's so interesting, it's so brilliantly written. All in all, just a fantastic, fantastic book. And then the absolute last prompt is trick or treat. Pick a book that you think you'll like and pick a book that you think you'll hate. Flip a coin and let that decide which one you read. So again, I can't make a recommendation for that one for you. So thank you guys for watching this quickfire recommendations video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Obviously, there is a lot more to some of these books than what I said, but a lot of them have such like intricate plots that I would have been talking about them for 5 minutes if I'd had to really get to the meat of what the story's about. So I tried to just pick out some keynotes to sell the books to you on, and I hope that you found some recommendations that you will enjoy reading for Sbooktober or just in general. Let me know in the comments what you're going to be reading in October for Sbooktober or otherwise. You can also leave some recommendations for these prompts as well for like other people watching this who need some suggestions. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you aren't already. In the description you'll find links to all of my social media. That's my Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Facebook, as well as my blog. You can also find a link to my Ko-fi account if you'd like to buy me a coffee. You'll find a link to my web store if you'd like to purchase anything from there, and you will also find a link to my Patreon. And I want to say a big thank you to my first patron, Annie Yadi. I am so grateful to you. Thank you so much for pledging to be one of my patrons. I appreciate it so much. So if you'd like to join her and become one of my patrons as well, my Patreon is linked in the description. Yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you again, Annie, and thank you to any of you who might decide to sign up from this video. But that's it for me today. I will see you all again very soon. Bye!